Her dog barked at the empty shed, and when the single mom opened it, she was frozen in shock. At first, it looked like just another abandoned building, rotting away behind her new home. But inside was something chained to the floor. Something that had been waiting to be found for over 70 years. Letters, photographs, a doll, pieces of a life hidden away, telling the story of a woman who mysteriously vanished. But the deeper she digs, the more terrifying the truth becomes, because the woman in those photos isn't a stranger. She's family. Now, every discovery pulls her closer to secrets the town never wanted uncovered. And to a son who grew up believing his mother abandoned him. Why was this shed sealed shut for decades? What happened to the woman who vanished? And what will happen when her lost child finally learns the truth? Let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. If you like stories that connect us, don't forget to subscribe before you leave. The late summer sun hung low in the sky, painting long shadows across the overgrown lawn of the old Turner farmhouse. Rachel wiped sweat from her forehead as she lifted another cardboard box from the moving truck. The house loomed before her, a two-story weathered structure that had belonged to her Uncle James. Now it was hers, a fresh start for her and Noah. "Mom, where should I put the kitchen stuff?" Noah called out, his small arms wrapped around a box nearly as big as his chest. Rachel hurried over, taking the heavy box from him. "Honey, let me get that. Why don't you focus on unpacking your room?" She smiled down at her son, his dark hair sticking up in all directions from the humid evening air. "But I want to help," Noah insisted, bouncing on his toes. His eagerness to pitch in always warmed her heart. "Okay, you can help sort the silverware once we get inside." Rachel adjusted her grip on the box. "Just nothing too heavy, deal?" Max, their golden retriever, trotted alongside them as they made their way up the creaking porch steps. He'd been exploring the property all afternoon, sniffing every corner and marking his new territory. The old house had a musty smell that Rachel hoped would fade once they got some windows open and fresh air flowing through. They had been unpacking for several hours when the light started to fade. Rachel was organizing dishes in the kitchen, while Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully arranging spoons and forks into neat piles. The peaceful rhythm of their work was suddenly shattered by Max's sharp, aggressive barking. Rachel jumped, nearly dropping a stack of plates. Max stood rigid by the back door, his fur bristling as he barked with an intensity she'd rarely heard from him. The sound echoed through the empty rooms. "Max, what is it?" Noah scrambled to his feet, pressing his face against the window glass. "Mom, look." Rachel joined him at the window. In the deepening dusk, she could make out a structure she hadn't really noticed before, an old shed standing about 50 yards behind the house. It was a sorry sight, with walls that seemed to lean at odd angles and a roof thick with green moss. Weather-beaten boards hung loose in places, and what might have once been red paint had faded to a dull rust color. Max's barking grew more frantic. He paced back and forth between Rachel and the door, clearly agitated. Is somebody in there?" Noah's voice quivered as he gripped Rachel's arm. The shed looked scary. Rachel's heart picked up speed, though she kept her voice steady for Noah's sake. "No, sweetie. It's probably just a raccoon or something that Max smells." But even as she said it, she felt uneasy. There was something about the way Max was acting. She'd never seen him this worked, up over a simple animal. "But what if?" Noah started. "It's an old shed, that's all." Rachel cut in, more firmly than she intended. She ran her fingers through Noah's hair, trying to soothe both him and herself. "It's been empty for years. See how rundown it looks." Max wouldn't let up, throwing his whole body into each bark, his eyes fixed on the shed. The sun had sunk lower, and shadows stretched across the backyard like long fingers. The shed seemed to grow more ominous in the failing light. "Come on," Rachel said, pulling Noah away from the window. "Let's finish getting the kitchen sorted before bedtime. Max, enough." But Max ignored her command, something he rarely did. Noah kept glancing nervously toward the window as they worked, and Rachel found herself doing the same. She tried to focus on practical things. finding homes for pots and pans, checking that the stove worked, making a mental list of repairs the old house would need. Yet her eyes kept drifting to that window, to the dark shape of the shed beyond. As night fell completely, Rachel did a final check of the house. She tested the locks on all the doors twice, drawing the curtains closed and turning on every light she could find. Noah was already in bed, exhausted from the move, but she knew he was still awake by the way he clutched his stuffed dinosaur. "Try to get some sleep, sweetie," she said, kissing his forehead. "Tomorrow we'll make this place feel more like home." "Can Max sleep in my room tonight?" Noah asked in a small voice. Rachel hesitated. Max usually slept in the living room, but one look at Noah's worried face made her decision. Of course he can, but Max had other ideas. When Rachel went downstairs, she found him stationed at the kitchen window, his nose pressed against the glass. His body was tense, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "It's just an empty shed, Max," Rachel whispered, trying to coax him away. The words felt hollow in her mouth, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Max's behavior than a simple animal intruder. Her hand shook slightly as she reached out to scratch behind his ears. Max didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the dark shape of the shed, barely visible now in the night. Rachel stood there for a long moment, one hand on Max's warm fur, staring out into the darkness. The rational part of her mind said there was nothing to worry about. It was just an old building, probably full of rusty tools and mouse nests. But something in Max's rigid posture, in the way he refused to be comforted, sent a chill down her spine. Finally, she turned away from the window, leaving Max at his self-appointed post. As she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, she could still hear his occasional soft growls floating up through the quiet house. It was going to be a long night in their new home, and Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the shed held secrets they weren't ready to discover. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm rectangles of light across the worn linoleum floor. Rachel stood at the stove, spatula in hand, watching pancake batter bubble and spread in the pan. The familiar smell of breakfast helped make the old farmhouse feel a bit more like home, even with moving boxes still stacked in every corner. "Mom, can I have chocolate chips in mine?" Noah asked from his perch at the kitchen table, swinging his legs back and forth. "Sure, sweetie. Just let me finish this plain one first." Rachel reached for the bag of chocolate chips, but Max's sudden growl made her freeze. The dog stood rigid by the window again, his black and white fur bristling along his spine. His ears were perked forward, and that same intense stare from last night was fixed on the shed. Noah's fork clattered against his plate. "Maybe it's haunted," he whispered, eyes wide. "Like in that movie where—" "No ghost movies before breakfast," Rachel said quickly, flipping the pancake onto a plate. But Noah's words hit a nerve. The shed did have an eerie quality about it, even in broad daylight. The way it slouched to one side, the darkness visible through its warped boards, it looked like something from a storybook, and not the happy kind. Max growled again, deeper this time. "That's it," Rachel said, turning off the stove. "We need to check it out, right now, in the daylight. Then everyone can see there's nothing to be afraid of." She tried to sound confident, though her heart beat a little faster at the thought. "Can I come?" Noah asked, already sliding off his chair. Rachel hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him to stay inside, but she knew that might only feed his fears. "Yes, but stay close to me." She grabbed a flashlight from one of the kitchen drawers. The shed's interior would be dark, even during the day. Max was already at the back door, pawing at it impatiently. The grass was heavy with dew as they crossed the backyard, soaking the hem of Rachel's jeans. Each step brought them closer to the mysterious shed, and Rachel found herself walking more slowly, studying every detail. In the morning light, she could see that the boards were weathered silver in places, while patches of ancient red paint clung stubbornly in others. The roof sagged even more dramatically up close, weighted down by thick clumps of moss. Noah's hand slipped into hers, warm and slightly sticky from syrup. "It's bigger than I thought," he whispered. He was right. The shed was surprisingly large, maybe 15 feet square. The kind of building meant for serious storage, not just garden tools. Max trotted ahead, sniffing intently around the base of the walls. He showed none of his earlier aggression now, just curiosity. Rachel reached for the door, then paused. "Stand back a little, Noah. Some of these boards look loose." The door handle was a simple wooden latch, worn smooth by years of use. She pulled it, and the door creaked open with a sound that made her teeth ache. The smell hit them first, musty and thick, the scent of things long forgotten. Rachel clicked on her flashlight, sweeping the beam across the interior. Dust motes danced in the light, swirling in the light. Disturbed air. Wow. Noah breathed. The shed was cluttered with the accumulation of decades. Old tools hung from rusty nails, rakes, shovels, things Rachel couldn't even name. A wooden workbench ran along one wall, its surface buried under mysterious objects covered in cobwebs. Broken furniture was stacked in corners. A three-legged chair, a headboard with elaborate carvings, what might have been a baby's crib. "Be careful where you step," Rachel warned, picking her way forward. The floorboard seemed solid enough, but she tested each step before putting her full weight down. Max followed close behind, his nails clicking on the wood. At first glance, it all seemed exactly what you'd expect in an old farm shed, just junk that no one had bothered to clear out. But then Rachel's flashlight beam caught something that didn't fit. "Mom, what's that?" Noah pointed to the same thing she'd spotted. In the far corner, partially hidden behind a stack of moldering cardboard boxes, was a trunk. Not just any trunk, but a large, old-fashioned one made of dark wood and brass. What made Rachel's breath catch wasn't the trunk itself, but what secured it. A heavy chain wrapped around its middle, bolted firmly to the floor with a massive padlock holding it all in place. Noah gasped. Why would someone chain a box in an empty shed? Rachel knelt beside the trunk, her mind racing. The chain wasn't rusty like everything else in the shed. Someone had wanted this trunk to stay exactly where it was, and they'd wanted it to last. The wood was scarred and weathered, but she could see hints of elaborate carving underneath years of grime. This wasn't just some old storage container. This was something important, something someone had gone to great lengths to keep hidden and secure. Max padded over, sniffing at the trunk intently. His tail wagged slowly, and Rachel realized this must have been what he'd been trying to tell them about all along. "Can we open it?" Noah whispered, crouching down beside her. Rachel ran her fingers along the chain, feeling its solid weight. "I don't think we can, sweetie. Not without the key." She studied the padlock. It was old but well made, the kind that wouldn't yield to any tool she had on hand. The trunk sat there like a challenge, like a mystery wrapped in chains. And Rachel knew with absolute certainty that it wasn't just filled with old clothes or photo albums. Whatever was inside, someone had wanted it kept secret. And now, kneeling on the dusty floor of her uncle's shed, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to find out what that secret was. Rachel's footsteps echoed on the old porch as she retrieved the tools from the house. The crowbar felt heavy in her hands, its rusty surface rough against her palm. She'd found it in the kitchen drawer, along with a sturdy hammer that had seen better days. "You stay here with Max," she told Noah, who stood anxiously by the front door. "I'll be right back." The morning sun had risen higher now, casting long shadows through the trees. Rachel walked purposefully toward the shed, tools clutched tightly. She had just positioned the crowbar against the padlock when a deep voice called out, "Might want to be careful with that. Old locks can snap in dangerous ways." Rachel startled, turning to see their neighbor, Eli, standing at the edge of the property. He was tall and weathered, wearing well-worn work clothes and a concerned expression. His gray hair caught the sunlight as he walked closer. "I'm Eli," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Live just over there. Knew your uncle pretty well." "Rachel Turner," she replied, shaking his hand. "And that's my son Noah, on the porch with Max." Eli nodded toward the trunk. "Found something interesting, have you?" "Yes, and it's chained to the floor." Rachel gestured with the crowbar. "I need to know what's inside." Eli studied the lock for a moment, then reached for the crowbar. "Let me help. Got more experience with these old things than I'd like to admit." His eyes crinkled with kindness. Sometimes they just need the right touch. Rachel watched as Eli positioned the crowbar carefully, bracing it against the lock's base. "On 3, he said. "We'll both pull." "Ready?" They counted together, and on 3, they threw their weight against the crowbar. The lock groaned but held fast. Once more, Eli encouraged. This time, Rachel could hear something giving way inside the mechanism. On the 3rd try, the lock finally surrendered with a sharp crack that echoed through the shed. The chain slithered to the floor like a metal snake. Noah appeared in the doorway, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. "Did you open it?" Rachel nodded, her heart pounding as she knelt beside the trunk. The lid was heavy, and decades of moisture had swollen the wood. With Eli's help, she lifted it slowly. The musty smell that wafted up made her nose wrinkle, but what lay inside took her breath away. Everything was remarkably well preserved, protected from the elements by the trunk's solid construction. "Oh my," Rachel whispered, carefully lifting out a bundle of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper was yellowed but intact, the ink still clearly visible. Beneath them lay a stack of black and white photographs, their edges slightly curled. But it was the doll that made her pause. It lay nestled among the papers like a sleeping child, its hand-sewn body soft with age. 2 shiny button eyes stared up at them, and its dress, though faded, was clearly made with loving care. "Look at this," Rachel said softly, picking up one of the photographs. It showed a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile, standing proudly in front of the farmhouse. In her arms, she held the very same doll they'd just found. The date was written in careful script on the back. June 1948. Noah leaned in closer. "She's pretty," he said, touching the photograph gently. Rachel reached for one of the secref letters, but Eli's sharp intake of breath made her look up. His face had gone pale, and he was staring at the trunk's contents with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Eli, what is it?" He shook his head slowly. "There were stories after the war about a woman who lived here. Clara, I think her name was. People said she just vanished one day." He swallowed hard. "There were whispers, but nobody ever knew for sure what happened." With trembling fingers, Rachel untied the ribbon and opened the top letter. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if written in great emotion. The first words made her heart skip. "My darling son." "Mom?" Noah's voice was barely a whisper as he tugged at her sleeve. His eyes were wide with concern. "Mommy, was this her shed? Did her little boy ever find her?" Rachel looked down at the doll in her hands, its button eyes somehow more haunting now. The stitches that formed its small, sewn smile seemed to hold countless secrets. The intimacy of the moment, holding this woman's treasured possessions, reading words meant for her child, sent a shiver down Rachel's spine. The shed suddenly felt smaller, more personal, as if Clara's presence lingered in every shadow. Rachel clutched the doll closer, acutely aware that she was holding not just a toy, but a piece of someone's heart, a mother's love preserved in fabric and thread for over 70 years. The morning sun streamed through the shed's dusty windows, illuminating the swirling dust motes like tiny stars. But Rachel barely noticed, her mind filled with questions about Clara and her son, about love and loss, and about the mysterious circumstances that had led to this trunk being chained and hidden away for so many years. The kitchen felt warm and cozy as evening settled over the farmhouse. Rachel sat at the worn wooden table, letters spread before her like pieces of a puzzle. Noah hummed quietly beside her, his colored pencils scratching against paper as he drew. The remnants of their simple dinner, mac and cheese with hot dogs, still lingered in the air. A gentle knock at the screen door made them both look up. Eli stood there holding 2 steaming coffee mugs, his weathered face kind in the kitchen's soft light. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting one mug in front of Rachel. "Been thinking about that trunk all day." "Come in," Rachel said gratefully, gesturing to a chair. "I've been reading these letters for hours, trying to make sense of them." Noah peered into Eli's second mug hopefully. "Is that hot chocolate?" "Sure is, buddy." Made it special for you. Eli winked, placing the mug carefully away from Noah's art supplies. Rachel shuffled through the letters, many of them still unopened. As she moved one stack, something slipped free. A folded piece of paper, yellow with age. When she opened it, her breath caught. "It's a map," she said, smoothing it carefully on the table. Faded red circles marked various trails, threading through the surrounding wilderness, connecting to what appeared to be their property. Eli leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "Well, I'll be damned. Excuse my language," he added quickly, glancing at Noah. "I know these trails. Used to patrol them when I was a ranger." Rachel traced one of the marked paths with her finger. "What were they used for?" Eli's expression grew serious. "After World War II, these routes were used to move refugees. People helping them called them sanctuary trails. There were safe houses along the way." He paused, studying the map more closely. "Your family's property. It would have been perfectly positioned." Rachel sat back, stunned. "Are you saying this house might have been part of some kind of underground network?" "Wouldn't surprise me. A lot of good people did what they could back then, helping folks find safety. Kept it quiet, though. Had to." A scratching sound from outside interrupted them. Max's urgent barking followed, coming from the direction of the shed. "Not again," Rachel sighed, but something in the dog's tone made her uneasy. This wasn't his usual alert. It sounded more insistent. "We should check," Eli said, already standing. "That dog's got good instincts." They found Max inside the shed, frantically pawing at the floorboards near where the trunk had been. His nails left marks in the old wood. "Max, stop," Rachel commanded, but the dog whined and kept scratching. Eli knelt down, running his hands over the boards. "This one's loose," he muttered, pressing down. "See how it moves." Rachel grabbed the crowbar they'd left earlier. "Should we?" "Hand it here." Eli positioned the tool carefully and applied pressure. The board came up with a groan, revealing a dark space beneath. Rachel shone her flashlight into the gap. Something metallic gleamed in the beam. "There's something down there." Eli reached in and pulled out a rectangular tin box, about the size of a thick novel. Despite decades of hiding, it hadn't rusted much. With trembling fingers, Rachel opened it. Inside lay several worn books. Ration books, she realized. And beneath them, something that made her heart skip. A military identification card. The photo showed a young woman in uniform, her face serious but beautiful. The same woman from the trunk photographs. But it was the name printed below that made Rachel's world tilt on its axis. "Clara Turner," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Eli looked between Rachel and the ID. "Turner. But that's my name." Rachel's fingers traced the letters as if touching them might make them more real. "She had my name." Noah pressed against her side, sensing her shock. "Mommy?" Rachel stared at Clara's face, seeing now what she'd missed before. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the jaw. Features that looked back at her from her own mirror every morning. Features she'd passed on to Noah. "This isn't just some random mystery," she said, her voice shaking. "This is my family. Clara. Turner was my family." The shed seemed to grow smaller around them, decades of secrets pressing in from all sides. Rachel held the ID card as carefully as she might hold a butterfly. This fragile piece of evidence that connected her to a past she'd never known existed. Eli put a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Rachel nodded slowly, though okay felt far from the truth. Her mind spun with questions. Who was Clara Turner really? What had happened in this very shed all those years ago? And most importantly, why had her story been buried so completely that Rachel, her own blood, had never known she existed? The military ID card caught the beam of the flashlight, Clara's young face seeming to watch them all with knowing eyes. Rachel felt the weight of generations in that moment, standing in the old shed where Clara had once stood, holding proof that this mystery wasn't just a story from the past. It was her story too. "We need to know what happened to her," Rachel said firmly, looking between Noah and Eli. "She's family. Whatever her secret was, she's our family." The Historical Society building stood like a proud old grandmother on Main Street, its red brick facade weathered but dignified. Rachel checked her watch, 9:15 in the morning, as she climbed the worn stone steps, clutching her canvas bag containing Clara's documents. "You two okay out here?" she asked, turning to where Noah and Eli settled on a wooden bench near the duck pond. "We brought breadcrumbs." Noah held up a paper bag, his face bright with excitement. "Eli says the ducks here are super friendly." Eli nodded, his weathered face crinkling into a smile. "We'll be just fine. Take your time, Rachel. Some answers are worth waiting for." Inside, the building smelled of old books and furniture polish. Rachel's footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors as she approached the front desk, where a woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from her computer. "Welcome to the Milton Historical Society. I'm Margaret Whitman, the head archivist. How can I help you today?" Rachel placed Clara's military ID on the desk with trembling fingers. "I need information about this woman, Clara Turner. She went missing in 1948. Margaret's friendly expression flickered, then steadied. She picked up the ID with careful hands, studying it through her reading glasses. "Where did you find this?" "In my uncle's old shed. I just moved into his property on Oak Hill Road." Rachel swallowed hard. I think she might be related to me." Margaret's eyes sharpened with interest. She gestured toward a research room off the main hall. "Come with me. This might take a while." The research room was lined with filing cabinets and smelled strongly of paper and dust. Margaret settled Rachel at a large oak table before disappearing into the archives. Through the window, Rachel could see Noah and Eli by the pond, tossing breadcrumbs to a growing crowd of ducks. Margaret returned carrying several folders and a bound volume of old newspapers. "Clara Turner's disappearance was quite the talk of the town back then," she said, spreading the materials across the table. "She worked as a nurse during the war, came home in 1945, lived in that farmhouse you're in now." Rachel opened the first folder, finding newspaper clippings yellowed with age. The headlines jumped out at her. "Local woman missing. Search continues for war nurse. Turner case goes cold." The official story was that she left town suddenly, no explanation given. Margaret continued, her voice lowering. "But there were rumors." "What kind of rumors?" Rachel asked, though something in her gut told her she already knew. Margaret glanced at the window, then back to Rachel. She was pregnant, according to several sources. Unmarried, which was scandalous back then. Some said she ran away to have the baby in secret. Others, she trailed off, shuffling through more papers. Others what? Some thought there might have been foul play. The father was never identified, but there were whispers about a prominent local family being involved. Margaret's fingers drummed quietly on the table. These kinds of secrets, they don't stay buried forever, especially in small towns. Rachel spread out the letters she'd brought, handling them carefully. She wrote to her son. "We found these in a trunk." Margaret reached for her glasses, leaning in to examine the letters. "This is significant documentation." "But Rachel," she looked up, her expression grave. "Are you sure you want to dig into this? Some people in town, old families especially, they might not appreciate these questions being asked. Even now." "Why not? It was 75 years ago. Old money has a long memory," Margaret said quietly. "And some of those families still hold considerable influence here." Rachel sat back, processing this. Through the window, she watched Noah laughing as ducks waddled after his breadcrumbs. Eli stood nearby, protective and watchful as always. "Did anyone ever find out what happened to her?" Rachel asked finally. Margaret shook her head. "The case went cold after a few months. No body was ever found, no baby either." She began gathering the materials into a neat pile. "I can make copies of everything we have on file for you, but I want you to understand, pursuing this might stir up more than just old memories." "I need to know," Rachel said firmly. "She was family, and if she had a child, then that child would be your uncle or aunt," Margaret finished softly. "Yes, I understand. Just be careful how you proceed." An hour later, Rachel walked out with a thick envelope of copied documents. Noah ran to meet her, his cheeks flushed from playing outside. "Mom, the ducks ate all our bread, and Eli knows all their names." "He's making those up, buddy." Rachel smiled, ruffling his hair. "Thank you for watching him," she added to Eli. "My pleasure. Find anything interesting?" Rachel nodded, her expression tight. "Let's head home. I'll tell you on the way." They drove back in Eli's truck, Noah chattering about the ducks in the backseat while Rachel explained what she'd learned. When she finished, silence filled the cab except for the steady hum of tires on pavement. Rachel caught Noah's reflection in the rearview mirror. His innocent face, his easy smile, so unaware of the weight of history they'd stumbled into. Her throat tightened as she whispered, barely audible, "She had a son, just like me." Her fingers gripped the steering wheel harder, knuckles whitening. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Another single mother, another little boy, separated by decades but connected by blood and circumstance. The uncertainty of Clara's fate, the thought of her facing everything alone, made Rachel's heart ache. In that moment, watching her own son's reflection, Rachel's determination crystallized into something solid and unshakable. Whatever the cost, whatever secrets she might uncover, she would find out what happened to Clara Turner and her child. She owed them that much. The afternoon sun streamed through Rachel's kitchen window as she and Noah worked side by side at the counter, the air sweet with the scent of vanilla and butter. Rachel had always found baking therapeutic, and today she needed that comfort more than ever. "Can I crack the egg, Mom?" Noah asked, bouncing on his toes. "Sure, buddy. Remember to tap it gently." Rachel guided his small hands, helping him break the egg into the mixing bowl. A bit of shell fell in, and she fished it out with a spoon while Noah giggled. "These cookies are for a special lady named Margaret," Rachel explained, measuring flour. "She might know something about the woman in the photograph we found." Noah's eyes widened. "The one with the doll? Can we bring it to show her?" Rachel nodded, glancing at the antique doll sitting on their kitchen shelf. Its button. I seemed to watch them as they worked. "That's exactly what I was thinking." They shaped the cookie dough into perfect circles, Noah proudly placing them on the baking sheet. As they waited for them to bake, Rachel packed the doll carefully in tissue paper, along with Clara's photograph. The smell of fresh-baked cookies filled the house, making it feel more like home than it had since they'd moved in. At 6 o'clock, they drove through the quiet streets of their small town. Margaret's cottage sat at the end of a narrow lane, its garden overflowing with evening primrose and forget-me-nots. The windows glowed warmly against the deepening twilight. "Remember your manners," Rachel reminded Noah as they walked up the stone path. He clutched the plate of cookies with both hands, determined not to drop them. Margaret answered their knock quickly, as if she'd been waiting by the door. She was smaller than Rachel had expected, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Rachel and Noah Turner," she said softly. "Please, come in." The inside of the cottage was cozy, filled with books and quilts. Photos in wooden frames covered nearly every surface. Margaret led them to a sitting room where tea was already set out on a lace tablecloth. "I brought cookies," Noah announced, presenting the plate with pride. "How thoughtful." Margaret smiled, but Rachel noticed her hands trembling slightly as she took the plate. "I haven't had homemade cookies in ages." They settled into overstuffed chairs, Noah immediately reaching for a cookie from their plate. Rachel carefully unwrapped the doll and photograph, watching Margaret's face. The moment the elderly woman saw Clara's image, all color drained from her face. Her teacup rattled against its saucer as she set it down. "Oh my," she whispered, reaching for the photograph with shaking fingers. "Clara." Rachel leaned forward. "You knew her?" Margaret nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "We were best friends from the time we were little girls. She lived just down the street from me then, before she moved to your farmhouse." She touched Clara's face in the photograph. "She was the kindest soul I ever knew, always humming lullabies, always ready with a smile or a helping hand." Noah moved closer, curious. "What kind of lullabies?" Margaret smiled through her tears. "Oh, all sorts. But her favorite was All the Pretty Little Horses. She said she'd sing it to her children someday. Her voice caught. She would have been such a wonderful mother. Rachel pulled out her notebook. Can you tell me about the last time you saw her? Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. It was a Tuesday evening in October, 1948. The air was crisp, leaves crunching under our feet. Clara seemed nervous, excited, but scared too. She told me she was meeting someone at the shed that night. Did she say who? Rachel asked gently. Margaret shook her head. No, but she was carrying a small suitcase. She hugged me so tight before she left, like she knew. She stopped, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Knew what? Noah asked, his voice small. That something wasn't right, Margaret said. I should have stayed with her, should have insisted on knowing more. But back then, we didn't question things the way people do now. She looked directly at Rachel. Clara never would have left willingly. Never. She was planning something that night, yes, but not to disappear. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. What do you think happened? Margaret lowered her voice, though they were alone in the house. Someone silenced her. Someone who couldn't risk their reputation being destroyed by whatever Clara knew. She glanced at Noah and chose her next words carefully. There were complicated circumstances, powerful people involved. Noah had gone very quiet, holding the old doll in his lap. Did they hurt her? He whispered. Margaret reached out and patted his hand. We may never know for certain, dear. But Clara was strong and brave, just like your mother. Rachel felt tears pricking at her eyes. The letters we found. She wrote to her son. Do you think there's any chance he's still alive? If he is, he'd be in his 70s now, Margaret said. She suddenly gripped Rachel's hand with surprising strength. If Clara's boy still lives, he deserves to know the truth. About his mother, about how much she loved him. She risked everything to protect him. Rachel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She gathered their things, carefully wrapping the doll again while Noah helped Margaret put away the teacups. At the door, Margaret hugged them both. Be careful, she whispered to Rachel. Some secrets don't want to be found. The drive home was quiet, Noah holding the doll while Rachel tried to process everything they'd learned. Streetlights cast long shadows across the dashboard, and she could see tears glistening on her cheeks in the rearview mirror. Clara's doll sat in Noah's lap, its button eyes reflecting the passing lights. Rachel thought about another mother, decades ago, holding that same doll, singing lullabies, and dreaming of a future with her child. A future that someone had stolen from her. The morning sun cast long shadows through the shed's weathered walls as Rachel and Eli gathered their tools. Rachel had barely slept, Margaret's warnings echoing in her mind. But she couldn't stop now, not when they were so close to uncovering the truth. You sure about this? Eli asked, testing the old wooden ladder they'd brought from his garage. These rafters haven't been checked in decades. Rachel nodded, pulling on thick work gloves. I need to know, Eli, for Clara, and for her son. Max sat alertly by the shed door, his tail swishing against the dusty floor. Rachel had left Noah at school, not wanting him around if they found anything unsettling. Eli went up first, his movements careful and precise. The ladder creaked but held firm. Looks stable enough, he called down, but watch your step up here. Some of these boards are rotted through. Rachel followed, her heart pounding as she climbed into the musty darkness above. The space was tight, filled with cobwebs and years of dust. Eli's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing ancient beams and forgotten corners. What exactly are we looking for? Eli asked, sweeping his light across the rafters. Anything that doesn't belong. Rachel replied, crawling carefully along a support beam. Clara was here that night. She might have left something else behind. They worked methodically, checking every nook and crevice. Rachel's knees ached from crawling, and sweat trickled down her back despite the cool morning air. After an hour, she was about to suggest they take a break when Eli's sharp intake of breath caught her attention. Rachel, he said quietly, come look at this. She made her way over to where he crouched near a corner joint. Wedged between two beams was a small scrap of fabric, no bigger than her palm. The material was brittle with age, its original color impossible to determine beneath dark, rust-colored stains. Rachel's hands shook as she carefully worked it free. Is this blood? Eli's face was grim in the flashlight's glow. Could be. Been meaning to tell you something, Rachel. All these years, I had suspicions about this place. She looked up sharply. What kind of suspicions? He sighed heavily, settling back against a beam. Used to be a park ranger, right? Back in 1978, we found some old papers blown into the forest near here. Police reports about Clara's disappearance. They didn't look too hard for her, if you ask me. Like someone wanted the case buried quick. Why didn't you say something before? Wasn't my place, Eli said quietly. Plus, those papers vanished from the ranger station the next day. Someone came and took them. Made me nervous, truth be told. Rachel carefully wrapped the fabric in a clean handkerchief. We need to keep looking. There has to be more. They split up again, checking every possible hiding spot. Rachel's flashlight beam caught something odd, a board that didn't quite match the others. Eli, help me with this. Together, they worked the board loose. Behind it was a small space, and tucked inside was an envelope, yellow with age, but still sealed. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were official-looking papers, the letterhead bearing a government seal. As she read, her breath caught in her throat. These are adoption papers, she whispered. Dated 1949. A baby boy, given to a family named Harrison. She looked up at Eli, eyes wide. They changed his name. Clara's baby, he lived. Eli leaned in to read over her shoulder. Says here the adoption was processed through St. Mary's Home for Children in the next county. All this time, Rachel murmured. Everyone thought both Clara and her baby were gone. But her son grew up, just, under a different name. They carefully made their way back down the ladder, Rachel clutching the precious documents. The morning had grown warm, sunlight streaming through the shed's gaps like golden ribbons. Max trotted over, nuzzling Rachel's hand as if sensing her emotional state. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Rachel could hardly focus on work, her mind constantly returning to those adoption papers. That evening, after dinner, she sat with Noah on his bed for their nightly story time. But instead of reading, she just held him close, breathing in the clean scent of his freshly washed hair. Mommy, Noah asked, looking up at her. Are you okay? Rachel smiled, though tears pricked at her eyes. Yes, sweetheart, I'm just thinking about Clara's baby. Did you find out what happened to him? She nodded, hugging him tighter. Her baby lived, Noah. He grew up with another family, but he's out there somewhere. He might still be alive. Noah sat up straighter, his eyes bright with hope. Can we find him? He should know about his real mommy. Rachel pressed a kiss to his forehead, marveling at her son's simple, pure understanding of what mattered most. I promise you, we'll try. Clara's son deserves to know how much his mother loved him enough to leave those clues for someone to find. Noah snuggled closer, yawning. I bet he has grandchildren now. Maybe they're my age. Rachel tucked the blanket around him, her heart full of determination. Somewhere out there was a man in his 70s who had no idea about his true heritage, about the mother who had loved him enough to leave a trail of breadcrumbs through time, a trail that had waited decades for someone to follow it home. The soft glow of Rachel's laptop screen cast shadows across her tired face as she hunched over the kitchen table. Empty coffee cups littered the surface, testament to hours spent clicking through ancestry websites and old records. On the living room couch, Noah had fallen asleep, Clara's button-eyed doll held protectively against his chest. Rachel rubbed her eyes, fighting exhaustion. The clock on the wall showed 11:45 at night, but she couldn't stop. Not when she felt so close. She'd been meticulously building Clara's family tree, cross-referencing adoption records from St. Mary's Home with birth certificates and census data. Come on, she whispered, scrolling through another database. Where are you? Max lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head when she spoke, as if offering silent encouragement. The house creaked and settled around them, but Rachel barely noticed, lost in her search. Then, Just as her vision started to blur, something caught her eye. A record from 1948. Infant male, surrendered to St. Mary's Home. The dates matched perfectly. Her heart began to race as she followed the paper trail forward. Thomas Reed, she breathed, clicking through to more recent records. 74 years old, currently residing in Millbrook. That was just 2 towns over, less than an hour's drive. Her hands shaking slightly, Rachel dug deeper. Everything aligned perfectly. His adoption date, his age, even physical descriptions from early records matched what she knew about Clara. Thomas Reed had been a teacher, now retired. He was widowed, with 2 grown children of his own. "I found him," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Clara's son. Noah stirred on the couch, mumbling something in his sleep. Rachel glanced at him, her heart swelling with maternal love. She thought about Clara, imagining her fear and desperation, trying to protect her own child all those years ago. The next morning, after getting Noah off to school, Rachel paced the kitchen, staring at her phone. She'd found Thomas Reed's number in an online directory, but now that the moment had come to make the call, her courage wavered. What if he didn't want to know? What if she was about to shatter the peace of an elderly man's life? Max nudged her leg, looking up at her with understanding brown eyes. Rachel took a deep breath and dialed before she could lose her nerve. The phone rang 3 times before a deep, slightly gravelly voice answered. "Hello? Mr. Reed? Thomas Reed? Speaking." "Who is this?" Rachel's heart pounded. "My name is Rachel Turner. I know this might sound strange, but I've been researching your birth mother, Clara Turner. I have some things that belong to her. Things I think you should see." There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Thomas spoke, his voice cautious but interested. "Clara Turner? You found something about her?" "Yes, sir. I'm living in her old house now. We found letters, photographs. There's even a doll she made. Would you be willing to meet with me?" Another pause, shorter this time. "I've wondered about her my whole life," he admitted quietly. "Yes, I'll meet with you. Tomorrow morning? There's a coffee shop in Millbrook called Sarah's Place." 10 o'clock? Rachel suggested, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "That would be fine. Thank you for reaching out." Rachel hung up feeling lightheaded with excitement. She immediately called Eli to ask if he could watch Noah the next morning, then spent hours organizing Clara's belongings, wanting everything perfect for Thomas. But the next morning, just as Rachel was getting ready to leave, her phone rang. Thomas Reed's number flashed on the screen. "Mr. Reed?" His voice was different now, cold, distant. "Mrs. Turner, I've been thinking. I need to cancel our meeting. But some things are better left buried," he said firmly. "I've lived 74 years without knowing, and I can live the rest the same way. Please don't contact me again." The line went dead before Rachel could respond. She sank into a kitchen chair, devastated. Max whined and put his head in her lap, but even his comfort couldn't ease the crushing disappointment. "I failed her," Rachel whispered, touching one of Clara's letters. "I was so close to fulfilling her last wish, and I failed." She spent the next hour sitting there, feeling hopeless. The morning sun climbed higher, streaming through the windows, but Rachel couldn't shake her gloom. Even Max seemed affected by her mood, pacing restlessly between her and the back door. Finally, the dog's agitation grew too intense to ignore. He scratched at the door, barking urgently. "What is it, boy?" Max bolted for the shed the moment she opened the door. Rachel followed, watching as he began digging frantically at a spot near the back wall, underneath where they'd found the trunk. "Max, stop. What are you?" But then something glinted in the disturbed earth. Rachel dropped to her knees, helping Max clear away decades of packed dirt. Her fingers touched something solid, a small metal box, no bigger than a deck of cards. With trembling hands, she pried it open. Inside, nestled in a scrap of yellowed silk, was a gold wedding ring. Rachel lifted it carefully, turning it to catch the light. There, engraved inside the band in delicate script, were the words, "To Clara, forever." Rachel stared at the ring, her mind racing. This wasn't just any ring. This was proof of a love story, one that had been hidden away for over 70 years. Maybe, just maybe, it was also the key to changing Thomas Reed's mind. Rachel's hands trembled as she held the gold ring, watching sunlight dance across its smooth surface. She needed someone else to see this, to confirm the importance of what she'd found. Without hesitation, she called Eli. 20 minutes later, his weathered truck pulled into her driveway. Rachel met him on the porch, still clutching the ring like a lifeline. "Come see what Max found," she said, leading him into the kitchen where she'd cleaned the ring and placed it on a soft cloth. Eli settled into a chair, adjusting his reading glasses as he picked up the ring with careful fingers. His eyes widened as he read the inscription. "To Clara, forever," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Rachel watched as the retired ranger's usual stoic expression crumbled slightly. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Rachel asked softly. Eli nodded slowly, still studying the ring. "This isn't just jewelry, Rachel. This is proof. Clara wasn't some wayward woman who abandoned her baby. She loved someone, loved them enough to wear their ring, and someone loved her right back." He placed the ring back on the cloth, his hands not quite steady. Whatever happened to her, she didn't choose to leave. Someone took her from her child, from the person who gave her this ring. She was silenced. Rachel sank into the chair across from him, letting his words sink in. The weight of Clara's tragedy pressed heavily on her heart, but with it came a surge of determination. "Thomas needs to see this," she said firmly. "He needs to understand his mother didn't abandon him. The man who refused to meet you." Eli's eyebrows rose. He seemed pretty clear about wanting to leave the past buried. Rachel stood up, pacing the kitchen. "Because he thinks she left him. He spent his whole life believing his mother didn't want him. But look at everything we've found. The letters she wrote to her darling son, the doll she made by hand, and now this ring. These aren't the belongings of someone who would willingly leave their child." She stopped at the window, looking out toward the shed. "I have to try one more time. Not for me, not even for Clara anymore, but for Thomas. He deserves to know how much his mother loved him." Eli was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "What's your plan?" Rachel gathered Clara's treasures with reverent care. The ring, the carefully preserved letters tied with faded ribbon, the handmade doll with its button eyes that had witnessed so much history. She found a sturdy box and lined it with soft tissue paper. As she packed each item, she told Eli the story behind it. How they'd found the trunk chained to the floor, the way the letters revealed Clara's gentle spirit, the doll that connected past to present. Last, she nestled the newly discovered ring in its own small velvet pouch. "I'm going to write him a letter," Rachel explained, pulling out paper and pen. "Something short, something he can't ignore." Eli watched as she carefully composed her message, crossing out words and starting over several times until she had exactly what she wanted to say. The final version was simple but powerful. "Dear Mr. Reed, your mother never left you. She was taken from you. These belongings prove how much she loved you, the son she wrote to, sewed for, and would have moved heaven and earth to protect. If you want to know who your mother really was, these things belong to you now. Rachel Turner." She read it aloud to Eli, who nodded approval. "Simple truth," he said. "Sometimes, that's the most powerful thing." Rachel sealed the letter and placed it on top of Clara's treasures. As she closed the box, she whispered a quiet prayer that Thomas would understand what she was trying to tell him. "I'll drive you to the post office," Eli offered. "This isn't something you want to trust to the regular mail pickup." They sent the package with tracking and insurance, though Rachel knew no amount of money could replace what was inside if it got lost. As she watched the postal worker carry it away, she felt a strange mixture of hope and loss. "Now what?" Eli asked as they walked back to his truck. "Now we wait," Rachel replied, "and hope that somewhere in Thomas Reed's heart, there's still a little boy who wants to know his mother loved him." The days that followed were some of the longest of Rachel's life. She tried to keep busy, unpacking more boxes, helping Noah with his schoolwork, taking Max for long walks. But her thoughts kept returning to that package, wondering if Thomas had received it, if he'd opened it, if he'd understood what she was trying to tell him. 4 days passed. 5, 6. Rachel began to lose hope, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake sending away Clara's treasures. What if Thomas just threw them away, refusing to acknowledge their significance? On the 7th day, Rachel was making dinner while Noah did homework at the kitchen table. The phone rang, and she almost didn't answer it when she saw an unfamiliar number. But something made her pick up. Hello? There was a shaky breath on the other end, then a voice she recognized, Thomas Reed's voice, but completely transformed from the cold, distant tone of their last conversation. This voice was raw with emotion. Mrs. Turner. He paused, and Rachel could hear him trying to steady himself. I got your package. Yes? She said softly, hardly daring to breathe. The ring. His voice broke, and Rachel realized he was crying. I remember that ring. I was so young, just a baby really, but I remember playing with it on her finger while she sang to me. I thought I'd imagined that memory, but seeing it now. Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth, her own eyes filling with tears. Noah looked up from his homework, concerned, but she gave him a reassuring smile. I need to meet you, Thomas said, his voice stronger now but still thick with tears. Please, I need to know everything you've found. I need to understand what happened to my mother. Rachel's heart soared. Of course, she said. Whenever you're ready, I'll show you everything we've discovered. Tomorrow? He asked, sounding almost desperate. I know it's sudden, but I've waited 74 years to know the truth about my mother. I don't want to wait any longer. Tomorrow is perfect, Rachel assured him. Come to the house, your mother's house. It's where this story needs to be told. After they arranged the details, Rachel stood for a long moment with the phone in her hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. Noah came over and hugged her waist. Are you okay, Mom? Rachel hugged him back, thinking about Clara and Thomas, about mothers and sons, about love that survived decades of silence. Yes, honey, she said. I'm more than okay. Tomorrow, we're going to help heal a very old hurt. She looked out the window at the old shed, no longer feeling uneasy about its presence. Instead, she felt grateful. That weathered building had protected Clara's secrets until the right time came for them to be discovered. Tomorrow, it would help tell its final story to the person who needed to hear it most. Rachel's hands trembled as she steered her car down Main Street of the neighboring town, following Eli's pickup truck. The morning sun cast long shadows across the road, and she could feel the weight of Clara's doll in her purse pressing against her side. Noah sat quietly in the back seat, understanding somehow that this morning carried special importance. You okay back there, honey? Rachel asked, catching his eye in the rearview mirror. Yes, Mom, just thinking about Thomas. Do you think he looks like the lady in the picture? Rachel hadn't considered that. We'll find out soon enough. The Bell Tower Diner came into view, its red brick exterior and chrome trim speaking of decades gone by. Eli pulled into a spot near the entrance, and Rachel parked beside him. Her heart was racing so fast she had to take several deep breaths before opening her door. Remember, Eli said as they walked toward the entrance. Take it slow. This is a lot for anyone to process. The diner was mostly empty at 10 o'clock in the morning, the breakfast rush long over. A few elderly couples lingered over coffee, and a waitress wiped down the counter with practiced moves. Rachel chose a booth near the back, where the morning light streamed through large windows. Noah slid in next to her, while Eli took the opposite bench. What time did he say he'd be here? Eli asked. 10:30. Rachel replied, checking her watch for the 10th time that morning. She pulled the doll from her purse and set it on the table, along with Clara's wedding ring. The items seemed to carry even more weight here, in this public place, than they had in the privacy of her home. The waitress came by with menus, but Rachel could only manage to order coffee. Noah asked for hot chocolate, and Eli requested a slice of apple pie. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching out like honey dripping from a spoon. At precisely 10:30, the bell above the diner door chimed. Rachel looked up to see an elderly man standing in the doorway, scanning the room. Thomas Reed was tall and thin, with a shock of white hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Despite his age, he carried himself with dignity, though Rachel could see his hands shaking slightly as he spotted them and began walking toward their booth. Rachel stood as he approached. "Mr. Reed." "I'm Rachel Turner." Thomas's eyes weren't on her, though. They were fixed on the doll sitting on the table. His face went pale, and for a moment, Rachel thought he might faint. Eli quickly stood and guided him to sit down. That's. Thomas couldn't finish the sentence. He reached out with trembling fingers to touch the doll's worn fabric face. "Your mother's," Rachel said softly. "She kept it for you." Thomas picked up the doll with the gentleness one might use to handle a precious artifact. "I remember this," he whispered. "I remember her holding it, singing to me." His voice cracked, and tears began rolling down his weathered cheeks. "All my life," he continued, "I believed she didn't want me, that she'd abandoned me because I wasn't good enough to keep. The family that adopted me, they were kind, but they couldn't tell me anything about her. I grew up thinking I must have done something wrong, even as a baby, to make her leave." Rachel reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "She never left you willingly, Mr. Reed. She loved you more than anything in the world." Slowly, carefully, Rachel began to tell him everything they'd discovered. About the hidden trunk, the letters, the blood-stained fabric in the rafters. About Margaret's memories of Clara's kindness and her plans to meet someone at the shed that fateful night. With each revelation, Thomas seemed to age backward somehow, as if heavy weights were being lifted from his shoulders. When Rachel showed him the wedding ring, Thomas let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "I remember playing with this on her finger. She'd let me spin it round and round while she told me stories. I thought I'd imagined that memory, but it was real. It was all real." Noah, who had been sitting quietly through all of this, suddenly slid out from behind the table. He walked around to where Thomas sat and reached for the doll in the elderly man's hands. "She wanted you," Noah said, his young voice clear and certain. "She loved you so much, she kept all these things safe, hoping someday you'd find them. She was your mommy, and she never stopped being your mommy." Thomas stared at the little boy for a long moment, then opened his arms. Noah stepped into them without hesitation, and Thomas pulled him close, weeping openly now. Rachel watched through her own tears as this man, who had carried 7 decades of pain, finally began to let it go in the embrace of a child who understood the simple truth: a mother's love never dies. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Rachel and Eli worked side by side, clearing decades of dust and debris from the old shed. What had once been a place of darkness and secrets was slowly transforming in the bright October sunlight. "Watch that loose board," Eli called out, steadying a ladder as Rachel climbed down with an armful of cobweb-covered tools. She smiled, remembering how different things had felt just weeks ago when they'd first opened the trunk. The crunch of gravel announced Thomas's arrival. He walked slowly but steadily up the path, his face brightening as he approached. Despite his 74 years, he insisted on helping, carefully carrying out broken boards and sorting through old items. "Each piece we clear makes room for her story," Thomas said softly, running his hand along a weathered wall. "For so long, this place held secrets. Now it'll hold memories." Rachel nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. They'd spent days planning how to transform the space into something meaningful. New shelves lined the walls, ready to display Clara's precious belongings. The trunk that had protected her treasures for so long would remain, but now opened, sharing its contents with all who visited. Margaret arrived later that afternoon, carrying a bouquet of white roses. Her eyes welled up as she placed them by the freshly painted door. "Clara loved roses," she whispered. "She always said they made any place feel like home." When everything was ready, Rachel carefully arranged the items they'd discovered. The letters, tied with their faded ribbon, sat beside the black and white photographs. The child's doll with its button eyes watched over the space from a special shelf. Finally, Rachel took Clara's wedding ring and placed it beneath her photograph, the one of her standing in front of the farmhouse, young and full of hope. "You're remembered now," Rachel whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The sunlight streaming through the new windows caught the gold band, making it shine like a beacon of truth finally revealed. The evening air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves as Rachel, Noah, Thomas, Eli, and Max gathered on the farmhouse's wraparound porch. Wooden rocking chairs creaked gently as they gazed at the transformed shed. Through its windows, battery-operated lanterns cast a warm, honeyed glow that spilled onto the dewy grass. "It's beautiful now," Noah whispered, his small hand wrapped around Thomas's weathered fingers. "Not scary anymore." Thomas nodded, his eyes glistening in the fading light. "Rachel," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you've given me back something I never thought I'd have, my mother's memory. All these years, I thought she'd abandoned me. Now I know how much she loved me." Rachel reached over and squeezed his hand. What had started as a mysterious discovery had blossomed into something more precious: family. She looked at the faces around her. Noah's innocent wonder, Thomas's quiet dignity, Eli's steadfast presence. They'd all been changed by Clara's story. "You know," Eli mused, leaning back in his chair, "even the darkest places can hold the brightest stories. This old shed proved that. Sometimes we just need the courage to open the door and look inside." Down by the shed, Max had settled peacefully beside the freshly painted door, his vigilant barking long forgotten. Rachel pulled Noah close as the first stars began twinkling overhead. The shed stood before them, its mossy roof and weathered walls now bearing witness not to secrets and fear, but to remembrance and hope, its warm light beckoning like a beacon in the growing dusk. If even one moment stayed with you, hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story written gently for the heart.